And thank you. Since you only gave me 45 minutes, there's not going to be anything on cover crops. They're great, by the way. There, you have the slide. So I'm out of Minnesota, West Central, and I work a lot with the Eastern Dakota people too. And we have a lot of tillage fields out there, and we've been doing this for quite a while. So we're going to kind of talk about what we've seen over the years. Now, why do we till? It's this guy's fault, by the way. It's not the band. It's the actual scientist named Jethro Tull. And what he believed is that a plant, you know, sometimes they thought, well, okay, maybe it takes up salts and maybe it does this. How does that plant actually grow? So in the 1600s, Jethro Tull made an announcement, and he was big in the scientific community, so it took off, that the plant actually sucked up soil into the roots. So you had to make it really fine and tiny so that it could get into the roots so that that plant can grow. And that way, when you tilled, the first 2 or 3 plowings that you did was just getting the field ready. And then you had to go in, he was also the creator of the cultivator. You go in there with the cultivator and you do that every week until your canopy closes and you can't get in there anymore. And that's why the crop quit growing at canopy closure, is because you weren't making it really nice and fine so the roots could suck it up. And it's like, wow, So that's, you know, people say, well, how did all this tillage start? Darn English people. So, but, you know, there's a lot of factors out of our control. So we have a lot of research that shows that any type of tillage system can work, and some work better, but no matter what I give you, I'm not sitting in your shoes where, do you have kids that are going to take over farming? The average age of a farmer is 56. So do you want to plan a whole new tillage system? And it's a system. It's not, hey, I'm just going to change out this one piece of equipment. And, you know, if you don't have kids that are doing this and you're around 60, you know, maybe not. The markets, when the price of corn went up, wow, the moldboard plows were being sold. They were having a great time because people were doing corn on corn. They couldn't deal with all the residue out there. Get the plow, bury it. So there's a lot of things that I don't deal with. So I know that my research is just a piece of what you guys have to deal with. But there is something you can control, and that's how aggressively and how often you till that field. How deep you till it, how many passes you make. But why should we even worry about excessive tillage? Now, for those of you maybe who aren't in Minnesota, this is called Moldboard Plow. I have people go, why do you keep talking about the plow? We don't use the plow. Oh, we do. We do a lot. So I try to, it's kind of the most extreme of all the tillages. Sometimes it takes 2 passes with a field cultivator to get it back so that you can plant on it. So, you know, my favorite is strip till, but this is the one that I get to compete against. So the main thing that tillage does is break down structure, and we'll talk about what that does and kind of the consequences. And these are 2 different fields, and the one that's on the left is my favorite, but this is not actually from a cropped field. This is, for full disclosure, it's under a grassed area, so it's never tilled, and it's, you know, it's never harvested and that type of thing. So that's like the extreme, the epitome, what we would love to see, but you will not see it under a crop system. And the more you till, you go towards the right side there, which is continuous moldboard plow. And moldboard plow is really good at breaking up particles and making them really fine and small pore spaces. And some of the people that sell like the disc rippers and the chisel plows, I've been listening to them, and they say, well, you know, you get more of this uniform seed area. If you do this tillage, you get this nice uniform area. And so the plants and the roots really like that. And it's like, yeah, but if you... Which one absorbs more water when you have a pounding rain? Which one holds on to water? Which one doesn't pond? Which one lets oxygen into the soil? It's the one with the structure on the left side. That's not homogeneous. That's not, you know, uniform. Plants don't want it uniform. Microbes don't want it uniform. If you look at that root on the very far right there, it is having a tremendous time trying to poke through that soil. It's finding the cracks to go down, and if you look, there's no root hairs off of that root. So it's not even exploring the soil around it to get nutrients and moisture. It's going to be stressed. If we have good rains, we'll be okay. But if we don't, that turns into a brick. So we want, when I'm in the soil pits, what we see is in between those two, and we try to get more towards the left and get away from the right side, and get more diversity and not be homogeneous in that soil. And then you've seen probably a lot of times when you go out and they take the soils, and the NRCS and Soil and Water have been awesome about showing this to farmers, is that if you have the soil that has a lot of tillage, when you put it into water, it just falls apart. And if you have a lot less tillage and good structure in the soil, then it stays put. The other thing about those little aggregates in the soil is they're your number one defense against soil compaction. And tillage just breaks them up. So the more tillage you do and the deeper you go, the more you break up that structure and the more your equipment's going to fall. So when you till a soil, what's nice, and the reason we till, not just so that the plants can suck up soil, is that we do it because it warms up the soil, right? You put that air into the soil, you put that residue down into the soil so you don't have that mat on top, and it warms up great, and especially in our dark soils as you go north. In Iowa has good soils too. And I've had to soil sample them as a master's student here. Wow, 4 feet. And when you look at it, the more that you till up the soil and introduce air, how much weight can air hold? None? It was an easy question, and it wasn't a trick one. So when you drive on it, it just falls back in on itself. So tillage begets tillage. You have to keep tilling to keep it going. And so when people say, well, I'm a disc ripper and I'm going to go to no-till, I'm like, they're going to have a very difficult time the first few years. So we try to back them off more in stages. And tillage, like I said, destroys the structure. And if you don't think structure is important, anytime you dig a soil pit, and I hope Mike goes by the same things, is that you never dig the soil pit bigger than the tractor. Because if you do, you can lose the tractor in the spring. If you don't think soil structure is important. Oh, and by the way, just to be obnoxious, that's a track and a tire. They're both stuck. Okay. So tillage erosion, we talk about water erosion and wind erosion, but really tillage is the most erosive thing out there. And it moves soil up and forward with the tractor. And Marla Reichman from MAFRE up in Canada and Manitoba, she did one where they dug a pit and put down corn seed, and then they ran over it with a tractor going one way and the other way with different tillage implements. And then you could see where the corn grows, so you can see how far it threw the corn. Oh, that was cool. If you go on Twitter or something, you can find it. It's really interesting to see how far. Now, we did soil pits where we dug out the soil, and I don't know why we did this, but we layered back in dark soil, light soil, dark soil, light soil. And then the last top one was sand. And so when we ran like a disc ripper through it and stuff, it was throwing it 12, 15 feet in front of us. And I didn't even realize it moved soil that much too. And there are studies that show that, since I don't have the time, but there's one from Morris in west central Minnesota that shows that on highly erodible lands with moldboard plow, so you're looking at the worst case scenario, the tillage was moving 27 tons of soil per acre per year downslope. And then the water could get those smaller particles and wash them down too, and it was washing a little less than 9 tons. So you were looking at 36 tons of soil was being moved downslope. And that's not what we want. So, well, we don't lose that much to erosion. I don't do moldboard plow on highly erodible slopes. I'm not really losing a lot, especially when I have those flat soils. Yeah, there's a little wind erosion, but it really doesn't do that much. Well, that's from Minnesota. We can get all our pictures from Minnesota. I don't have to go looking at, what are they called? Hubbubs? What are they? The big, huge dust storms that go over Phoenix. I don't have to get those. We just go out the door. So if you look at the annual wind erosion, and this is in '97, that's the latest one I can get. After we had corn go up to $7 a bushel, I know that area grew. So we're in the Red River Valley. I'm kind of like the little western bump of Minnesota. I kind of work around that area. And the Red River Valley has very high clay content soils and very flat, because that used to be an old lake bed. And that's how the glaciers drained. They went that way. So when you look at that, do you know how big a soil particle is for clay? Sand, because you can hear it and it scratches, and you see it in your little play boxes for the kids and grandkids. But clay is microscopic, and it's just, you can't see it with the naked eye. So how easy is it to move with the wind? It's incredibly easy to move. So when you see that hazy sky, that's your clay. And when you look in the ditch, that's more of your sand and your silt. So we went out, and my cohort and I, we went out into 6 different ditches, varying levels of snow cover. So when I moved to Minnesota, I learned the term snert. For those of you who live further south, that's snow and dirt. And we would see, we haven't had very good coverage in Minnesota and in the north with snow. Snow is a wonderful blanket over the winter time, so it keeps your soil from moving. And if you ask anybody who snowmobiles, they will tell you, these have not been good years for snowmobiling. And that means we have more soil moving. So we went out and sampled 6 ditches, and you take a known area and you take the snow profile, and then you go and let that melt. You take the soil, you have it go in and get it analyzed, and then I sent it to ARS in Brookings, and they helped me calculate it back out to a ditch acre. So this is what collected in the ditch, not what left each acre of the field, surrounding field. We have to make that very clear, because newspapers got a hold of that and said, oh, we're losing 9 ton an acre. And you're like, no, we're not. That's what's collecting in the ditch. So what we found is that you have NP and K, and we did a full spectrum on it. But it was about $50, and depending on the price of NPK, of course, that goes up and down. So we're losing about that per acre that gathered in the ditch. This is the drive that I take to work every day. And so they say, do you have any impact? And I said, I don't think I do. Telling them to reduce tillage. So the one up above has no residue, about 15%. And so the ditch next to it is just black. I went a mile down the road. You could see the same windbreak in the background there. And we had 45% residue, and the ditch was fairly white. So when you take those 6 ditches, it was anywhere from 1.6 tons of soil collected in that ditch up to 33 tons of soil in that ditch. And that averaged about 9 tons, or 18,000 pounds of soil moved off that neighboring field into the ditch. So, that's our soil. We want it. And now it was also 4.1 in organic matter %. And Dorian, who works with me in the summertime, he also found out it has soybean cyst nematode that was moving in it too. So, when we're in southern Minnesota, all the fields have SCN. But when you go to northern, they're like, no, don't bring that with you. They're already mad at the geese. So then we're looking at the water erosion. So that's wind erosion. That was calculating some of it. And this one is the water erosion. This is on a slope, and this gentleman did shallow tillage year after year. He did vertical till. He was really trying to leave residue, but he actually formed a pan, and I didn't know you could do that with vertical till, but he did it, because for 10 years using the same tillage, spring, fall, he did create a pan. I like to see rotational tillage, people trying different things, but keeping out with the plow and disking. Disking is the worst thing you could do for soil structure. And the reason why, when they're building a new road, what's the piece of equipment that's always sitting there? A disc. Okay, and the reason why is it just pulverizes it really well. So it makes a really good roadbed, so you don't have the heaving and things like that. But is that what you want in your field? Probably not. So the annual water erosion, the areas that are red, that means that they have a worse problem, up to about 8 ton an acre that is, moving. But we have events, we've heard from Iowa, and we felt for you that even no-till fields were moving with the rain these past few years. And when you get 7 inches of rain in an hour or two, you're going to be hard-pressed to have anything that's going to hold your soil back except for maybe cement. So, we're trying to back off wind and water erosion. The other thing with water erosion, our systems aren't that leaky. I mean, when you're looking at a field and you're losing only 1% of your phosphorus, And so you're putting down 100 pounds for 2 years, to cover 2 years, and you get 1 pound that's leaving. That's not a lot. That's a pretty tight system. The problem is that stupid 1 pound of phosphorus makes 500 pounds of algae, and they have studied that a few times. And yes, it's just food for algae. They love it. And then you get the lake owners saying, well, isn't phosphorus toxic? And it's like, no, it's an essential nutrient. It's just out of whack at the moment. So the water washes away our nutrients, and phosphorus clings to soil, and it washes our soil away. So if we can keep our soil in the field, a lot of our nutrients would stay there where we paid for them for our crops where we want to use them. So 5 tons of soil an acre is an acceptable loss by the NRCS. They say, 5 tons an acre, which is about a dime's width. But over the years, that really adds up because we don't build soil. We don't make soil. Okay. They say, an inch in 100 years. Well, okay, one, that's out of my lifetime. But actually, as you go north and things slow down, it can be 400 or 500 years before you can get an inch of soil. So don't count on that as replenishing your fields. It's not going to help you. So we just want to keep down erosion as much as we can. So this acceptable loss, if you're looking at 5 tons an acre over 40 acres, is 16 dump truck loads of soil. So I don't know very many farmers that if I showed up with 16 dump trucks for that little section there and say, do you mind if I just take your best soil, just the topsoil, and not pay you, you'd be a little bit torqued. So what is the value of this topsoil? Well, it is hard to find actual numbers, but let's just say you're going to replace it with your garden soil type thing and you had to buy it. So if you lost 5 tons and it's $25 to go pay for a ton of soil out there, and that's $125 an acre, and over 40 acres, that's $5,000 a year that you would have to replace by buying it to put it back out there. And if you own 1,000 acres, that's $12,000. So, in the whole scheme of things, when you're buying equipment and that's $100,000, maybe that's not, but that can really help. Plus, that's your nutrients. So not only are you you're just having to replace the soil, but the nutrients that it took with it as well. So how do you protect against erosion? Those are some blow sands by us. Now we have had guys from the blow sands of Nebraska come up to our soil pits, and our farmers, when I dig a soil pit in the sand in Minnesota, they go, oh, look at all that sand, yeah. And then the Nebraska guys come up and go, wow, look at all that clay. So it's all relative, but we do have some good sands, and they do blow. So you want to build your soil structure. The biggest way, keep it covered, okay? And it doesn't matter if it's with residue or with cover crops. Cover crops help build the soil. Tillage will always break down the soil structure. So you want to minimize the tillage that you do. And when we're looking at percent residue, the NRCS says, well, about 30%. That's what you want. You want to keep that. Well, if you actually want to keep your organic matter content strong and or building, you'll want higher than 30% residue. But I'm still talking 40, 50%, which is still leaving 50% of the soil black. So let's get that soil structure. How do you do that? Again, tillage will always break it apart. And this is a really good picture to show you how this soil acts as columns, those aggregates act as columns in the soil and help keep up the weight of equipment so that you aren't sinking into your soil. I can almost guarantee you, anytime you see a tractor out there stuck, see how deep it is because it's usually his tillage layer. Okay. One of the farmers that we worked with, and he tried vertical till for the first time, usually a disc gripper. He says, I like that vertical till. And I said, you do? Why's that? And he goes, well, it gives me a floor at 2 inches because that's all he's tilling, so that's the furthest he sinks. And I was like, okay, it's true. Again, this is what we're trying to go for, the one on the left. Microbes do form structure. So the more diversity we can get in there, which cover crops enhances tremendously. Rotating crops, manure. Manure is a wonderful food source. It's a buffet for those microbes. So if you ever get a chance to get it out there, get it and then put it under because, it stinks. But if you have the microbes, they physically hold the soil together. They let off sticky substances that help hold the soil together. They're wonderful. But you can tell in this picture that if you did tillage and you brought a shank through that, you're going to break up hyphae. Now people are like, oh, it's just detrimental to the soil. It's like taking a tractor through a kitchen full of people. And it's like, if those people are bacteria, they're like, partay. If they're fungi, they're like, then they're dying. The bacteria actually take off when you do tillage. It's a huge burst because one, you gave them air, oxygen. Remember, and Mike was saying you need oxygen, and you gave them food. You opened up the aggregates to expose even more food for them, and they go crazy. Problem is, we don't like that. We don't want them to go crazy. We want like a little party, not a big, huge, big party. And like I said, fungi don't like tillage. But if you build the right soil, they will come. And Kevin Costner, okay, so anybody who's under 30, sorry. So, yeah, and we're in Iowa, so come on, we gotta have the field of dreams here. So, so there's products, the bugs in the jugs, I'm just not fond of, because if you don't have a habitat for them, they're gonna die. If you throw them in the Sahara Desert, they're gonna die. So now if you need to inoculate once and then that's fine, then that means you have a habitat. Like, okay, if something gets flooded and so things have died, that's a good place to inoculate. If you are trying to plant corn after sugar beets or any brassica, canola, that type of thing, then inoculate. You can do some mycorrhizae that way. But if you have to use it every year, remember Mike was saying how much was in 1 ounce of soil, and the figures I've seen is in a cup of soil, you have 9 billion microbes. You build a home for them, they will come. They will work for you. So Jerry Hatfield here in Iowa, he used this, and I like this one. This is to show you how important organic matter is. And what's really cool is, like, if I give a talk on organic matter or microbes or compaction or soil health, they're all interrelated. So anything that you do to help one will help all of these. Water infiltration, all of that. So if you can improve your organic matter, you're improving your structure, you're improving your microbes. I know there's a lot of tests out there for microbes, and they're great if you're really into the small details. But if I come out to your field and your wind is blowing your soil away, you have a bigger problem than the microbes in the soil. So let's take care of the big things. It's kind of like somebody looking at cobalt, but they're not looking at their NPK first. You know, look at the big things, then you can start going down to the smaller things and really fine-tuning it. But if you're just starting, cut the erosion. If we can cut the erosion, your microbes are going to grow anyway. So here's a field that, and everything's very dark green, it's early August. You really don't see much yield variability out there. It looks like everything's doing really well, but yield variability is based a lot on the moisture you're going to be getting. And so by late August, you start seeing where that organic matter is, and where the knolls are, the clay knolls or the sandy knolls, the gravel knolls. And you end up getting a huge extreme in your yields. So organic matter is very important for holding on to water. And some of the numbers out there is 27,000 gallons per % organic matter it can hold on to. So that's almost 1 gallon per corn plant. So additional data, this one's busy, but I will break it down here. So we're saying corn uses about 1/4 inch of water a day. And so we need to be able to supply that to the plant. And if you have sand, silt, or clay, you're going to have different, you know, your soil inherently can hold more soil the higher the clay content. Sometimes it holds on to it too tight, but. So this is looking at the bottom, you're looking at the organic matter level, 1 to 5%, and then you're looking at sand, silt, clay. The maroon is the sand, the gold is the silt loam, and the silty clay loam is the gray. Let's just look at 2% versus 4% organic matter. And these are things that you can build, especially if you're in sands. And it shows that if you have 2% organic matter and your corn is starting to stress and you're running out of water, you have 3 days to get a rain before your corn plant is beyond the wilting point. And if you have 4% organic matter, you have 6 to 8 days based on soil type. So it gives you an extra 3 to 4 days before that rain. You really need that rain. And 3 and 4 days can make a huge difference, especially in July and August. Now, when you're looking at your knolls and they have the lighter colored soil and all your dark colored soils down below, now you're looking at more like 1% or 0% organic matter. And that's why they burn up, is because on the knolls, it's, you're lucky if you got a day or two worth of water there. And up above, if you go to 4%, the down low areas, then you're looking at the 6 to 8 days again. So that's another reason why your knolls are burning. The other thing about tillage is that it releases carbon, or your organic matter. So what's the difference between soil organic carbon and soil organic matter? You hear scientists, they always use the carbon. The reason why is because organic matter is half carbon. So they measure carbon. And so, you lose it as carbon dioxide because the microbes eat that carbon, like we eat hamburger, and they respire it off as CO2. Like we respire. If you put a bubble over us, you would see CO2 coming up from us. So that's the same thing with the microbes. And so how many pounds of CO2 are we releasing right now? I have no idea. I don't even know what a pound of CO2 looks like. So in Morris at the ARS, they have Mr. Gem, and he's the Mobile Research Gas Emissions Machine. I think it's machine. And he goes out there, and it's a plexiglass box that they sit down right after you do tillage. They sit it down, and it measures how much moisture and how much CO2 is being lost from the soil. And so why we can't see it, this machine can measure it. And what they found is that in 19 days after tillage, one, you're going to get this huge burp, because you have CO2 just kind of in there, and as you do tillage, the deeper, the more aggressive you do tillage, the bigger the CO2 release, the initial release. And what they found is that Moldboard Plow, the MP, Moldboard Plow, lost 3,800 pounds of carbon dioxide as organic matter in just 19 days. Disc harrowing lost 1,600, chisel plow lost 1,500, and no-till, the natural, in and out of oxygen into the soil and CO2 is about 765 pounds. So there's a lot of machines out there. And then if you look at strip till, he did other strip till ones. It would be it's actually less than chisel plow because you're only tilling a third of the soil. You're tilling as deep as chisel plow in a lot of the systems. But, so it'd be between no-till and chisel plow. Now, what's interesting about this is that after that wheat crop, the wheat crop only put in 2,800 pounds. So the Moldboard Plow is taking out 1,000 pounds more of that organic matter than what's being put into your soil bank. So that's why Moldboard Plow, in Minnesota, in western Minnesota, in the tall grass prairies, we actually had 10 to 12% organic matter soils. We are now at 3 and 4. And the Moldboard Plow was king. That's what did it. So, because it's always taking out more than it's putting back in. So over time, again, you lose the organic matter. So you can see if you have Moldboard Plow, which is the one on the left, the 2.4% organic matter, this is in the top 3 inches. Then you have the deep tillage, the no-till, and then the grass. Well, not very many of us can make a living on grass, well, unless you're in Colorado. But so, true or false? My soils aren't going to dry up or warm up if I don't do some tillage. That air is really good for the soil. Okay, well, this is some data that we have from 4 years of research, and one of the farmers is here, so you can ask him questions. Raise your hand, Paul. He's right there. So he helps us out, and we're looking at different tillage systems, and what we find, if you look at this, is that the heat, how much heat is being lost from this? And we go down 18 inches into the soil. We have a grad student that collects this every week in Minnesota, summer and winter. And I'm so glad I'm not a grad student anymore. And no-till was about 42 degrees, so a little cooler. But if you look at strip till in the berm and chisel plow, they're both ready to plant for corn. And it's going to take a few more days for no-till to get there. And vertical till does about 3 inches of tillage, and it's at 47 degrees. But if you notice with strip till, what it does is it pushes the residue off the berm, depending on the machine type, but with a shank, it pushes it off into the areas here. So you actually get higher residue between the berms, and it's not as cool as no-till. When you look at the moisture, same thing. The reason why is because the heat comes through the berm and dries and warms up underneath the berm, but there's more water under there. So not only does the berm warm up so that you can get planted and dries out so you can get planted, but it keeps cooler and wetter underneath the residue for later on when you need that moisture. So strip till to me is like the best of both worlds. And if you kind of do a comparison here, if you have 50%, if that's at 50%, that means your soil's saturated. And if you do saturate your soil, and as you start heading to that, denitrification takes off. And you can lose 2 to 4 pounds of nitrogen per acre per day, going back up to the atmosphere. So again, your nitrogen. That doesn't really hurt you on water quality, but it does hurt your crop. So, well, but my yields are gonna suffer if I don't do some tillage, you know. So we do full field plots. I call them plots, they're actually fields. And they're always the width, each treatment is the width of the planter, because you don't want a planter half on moldboard plow and half on, you know, strip till. That won't work well. And so most of them are full field. A few of them are on station, research stations. But what we found out, this is one in west central Minnesota, is he had corn and beans going, and he was looking at strip till, the maroon bar, vertical till, the yellow bar. We were doing a chisel plow vertical till based on crop, corn bean rotation. And then we did a disc grip chisel plow rotation, and that was his rotation. So we always put the farmer's rotation in there so he, you know, can see what he's doing compared to this. So in strip till, we had 64% residue, and the other one's in the 40s, which is 40s are still good. And our yields are the same. But I find that with beans all the time. Beans are just the little darlings out there. They grow, you can roll them, you can do all sorts of crap. You can spray them with Cobra, you can do all sorts of things. And same yield. When you look at North Dakota, remember that's a really cold place. In Minnesota, we're happy we don't live in North Dakota because it's colder. And they have, when they looked at 17 site years of data, they found that 75% of the time, beans didn't care what tillage you did. No-till, chisel plow, strip till, they didn't care. If they did care, about 18% of the time, they liked strip till over any of the other ones. And another 6% wanted chisel plow. I just saw my time left. Corn, we'll speed it up. Again, strip till keeps more residue in there, but what we found is corn, there was no statistical difference. Well, 4 bushel. See down at the bottom, it says 4 bushel. So there is 1 in there. The chisel plow did less than the vertical till, which is surprising. You know, you think, oh, that's full tillage, deep tillage, that's what we need. When you looked at North Dakota again, what they found is corn, yes, is a little bit pickier about the tillage, but 44% of the time didn't care. Another 44% of the time did want strip till, and then chisel plow a little bit. But weather has more of an effect than what we found on tillage. So this was done in 2004 across 10 locations in southern Minnesota up into western Minnesota. And we found that no-till, the maroon bar, actually had a yield decrease compared to the other tillage systems, but it was a cool, wet year. In 2005, where we had a fantastic year, no yield difference. You could be no-till. Now, remember, if you're a no-tiller, don't be disheartened, because this is the first year no-till. I don't have long-term no-till plots. I wish I did, and we're gonna start some pretty soon. So, okay, well, I can't afford this, and I might pass some of this, but basically, the more aggressive your tillage, the deeper your tillage, the more times you go over the field, the more fuel it costs you. And Iowa State did one with Mark Hanna there, and they were looking at shallow disking versus moldboard plow and strip till. And what they found basically was moldboard plow, if you did 2 field cultivations, that over 1,000 acres, is that you're gonna use 546 more gallons of diesel than shallow disking, and another 400 if you were comparing that to strip till. So that makes sense. Then there's Patrick for his PhD up in Manitoba. He was looking at how many acres you could get across, and then also how much fuel you used. And so what he found out is that if you double disked, and this is fairly shallow, and it's 2 passes, you were using about 1,400 gallons over 1,000 acres. Vertical till at 6%, so they had aggressive vertical till. It was on a gang, and so if they kept it straight, that was the 0, and if they did it at 6%, then that was the aggressive one that they did. Both of them had 2 passes, and then strip till with only 1,000 gallons. Remember though, strip till's 1 pass. If you have to add anything else to freshen up the berm, you have to add that cost to it. So basically, differences in your yields aren't as based on tillage. I would like to say they are because, you know, that's my job, If you ever seen Fred Below, the 7 Wonders of Corn Production or something, I think tillage is down at 4, and I was like, oh, I'm so insulted, but actually, it really, especially for beans, they just don't care. So I love the strip-till corn, and I hate following Fred Below. If you ever see him, oh yeah, and you're like, and you don't need to give him a microphone, so he's fantastic. So if you're growing beans or certain ones, they could be no-till, and it's okay. So you can have the same yields, and I know a lot of you guys are actually getting better yields with strip-till and even with the no-till. And so it reduces your erosion, and it reduces your cost on your equipment. It reduces the time that you have to be out in the field, and it keeps the nutrients in your field. And that's the best that we can do. You know, by keeping that soil in the field, it's not going to the ditch. Then the ditch gets to the stream, and the stream gets to the lakes and down the coast or down to Texas and things like that. So, you know, we do want to keep the nutrients. We paid for them. They're expensive. They're for our crops. So, you know, if you can keep down that erosion, and you do that by building your soil structure. So I like when farmers look at their different fields and say, you know what, that one's sandier, I'm going to do less tillage. So where Mike was talking about the shank, I actually like the machines, sorry, and I don't sell any of these, and I've used many of these, including the Orthman, that did wonderful, and almost everyone out there we've used. And you can take out the shank and put in double coulters. Now you can run in the spring. Now you can run on your sands. And when I use the shank, I use it for my clays, and I use that in the fall. And so they all have something different. Now, if I go over into eastern North Dakota, or western, I'm going to start talking about the least amount of tillage they can do, because they're looking at moisture savings. I know. He's like going. But when we're in Minnesota, my guys, 80% of our guys are disc rippers. So to back them off to really small tillage is, you know, we try to get them, okay, we're going to do deep tillage, but only right here. So we work with what the farmer's comfortable with. Also, what kind of crops are you growing? How much residue do you have left over? How many acres are you on? The guys on 10,000 acres might not be able to run a strip tiller. The guys on 100 acres might want to rent a strip tiller in. You know, everybody's situation is different. And respect tradition. Okay, this is a big one. But keep an open mind. I'm actually getting more older farmers coming to me and saying, my son wants to till everything up. I spent a long time going to strip till and no-till, and now my son wants to till it up because it's faster. It's like, yeah, send them to a field day. Bottom line, you are the one who manage this resource. And we have a tillage guide of 13 years of research from Minnesota and North Dakota, and you can go online and get that, and you can follow me on Twitter. And yeah, and we have a conservation tillage conference that's similar to this, and we have that in Fargo this year. So the cartoon says, why am I naked? Because I'm strip tilling, you darn fool. So, and I did change the title of my talk. It was going to be Stripping for Profit, but I think the university looks down on that, so.